They say every wedding has one unexpected moment. Ours came at 2:46 in the afternoon. I had just returned to the head table after greeting my aunt from Montreal when Danielle reached for my wrist. Her face suddenly pale. "You got an email?" She whispered. "From Crescent." I blinked. I wasn't expecting anything from work. Crescent was closed today. My entire team had been given the Friday off. My job was project director. I designed safety systems for high-rise residential towers across Vancouver. 12 years of unblemished service. Never missed a deadline. Never missed a fire code update. I pulled out my phone. The subject line read, "Congratulations. You're done." I opened it. The first thing I saw was a photo attachment, my office door. Or rather, what used to be my office door. My nameplate, Evan Carter, had been removed. The screw holes were still visible. Below the image was a formal letter of termination, effective immediately, signed by Ethan Lawson, Crescent's new VP of Operations and Gregory Lawson's only son. Then, Verme, in italics at the bottom, "We wish you well in your next chapter. Consider this our wedding gift." I stared at the screen, jaw locked. I could feel my fingers begin to tremble. I tilted the phone slightly, angling it away from Danielle, trying to keep the moment contained. But she noticed. She always does. Her hand reached mine again. "Tell me it's a prank. Tell me this is a groomsman joke." I said nothing, just kept reading the letter, scanning it for some logic. There was none. No reason, no warning, just cold removal. "My name is Evan Carter. I'm 37, one show a warranty. I was born in Kelowna and moved to Vancouver in 2009 after completing my master's in structural systems. I joined Crescent Designs at 25 and rose quietly through the ranks. I wasn't flashy. I didn't play politics. I solved problems. Apparently, that made me a threat. Danielle and I met 5 years ago during a municipal housing audit. She's sharp, decisive, and grounded, a regulatory specialist with the city who never lets emotion cloud judgment. But right then, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear, not for her job. For me, I reread the line, "Our wedding gift." For a company that once toasted my work ethic at its holiday gala. It felt like a polished betrayal, executed with precision. Around us, the celebration continued. Wine poured, laughter echoed. But I couldn't unsee that photo. Couldn't unfeel the tremor in my wrist. Danielle leaned in. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were steel. "This doesn't end here." I looked at her and nodded. Not a chance. And then I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because in that moment, I knew something with absolute clarity. If this was their wedding gift, they hadn't seen what I had in mind for the anniversary. I didn't leave the apartment that weekend. Not once. While the city bathed in late summer light, I stayed inside, pulling every fragment of my former digital life from cold storage password vaults, project archives, encrypted notes, each one a breadcrumb from a version of me who already suspected this day might come. Danielle kept the blinds drawn. She didn't ask questions, just slid plates of food beside me like we were in some kind of war camp. When she sat, she read not the news, but old regulatory files from the city's Housing Integrity Board. I could tell she was preparing in her own way. Monday morning, Ostegio 30 foot. A board meeting convened on the 20th floor of Crescent's headquarters. I wasn't invited, but I had no need to be. Gregory Lawson sat at the head of the table, his face stone set as his son. Ethan, one on petit, walked through a pre-approved restructuring plan. It included dissolving my department, consolidating my team under operations, and rebranding the Anderson Tower Initiative as a new next-gen build. No one mentioned my name, but every slide screamed it. Gregory didn't object, didn't flinch. This was the same man who once shook my hand after a public tender win and called me the backbone of this firm. Now, Windhornamaitum. He adjusted his cufflinks while his son buried my legacy. Why the silence? The answer was in the looks exchanged across the table. Pride and legacy, public image. Gregory had always protected the Lawson name, and in his mind, questioning Ethan now after placing him in power meant admitting a mistake. To him, that was worse than injustice. That was weakness. So he watched. Let it happen. Let me be erased for the sake of optics. And me, I watched too from home. Through a secondary link someone from accounting left open by accident or loyalty. I noted every slide, every timestamp. When the meeting ended, I opened the Crescent org chart on my laptop, my name still visible at the top of engineering. I clicked remove, one to remove. A warning flashed. Are you sure you want to delete this user? I clicked yes. If they wanted a ghost, I'd become one, but not the kind that disappears. The kind that haunts ordinum unchemasawen. Danielle stepped beside me, holding a mug of coffee. You okay? I pulled out a clean notebook, wrote today's date at the top, then mice beneath it. One line, plan begins now. This wasn't mourning. It was strategy. While the city basked in late summer light, I stayed inside, spiraling through fragments of my erased professional life. But Sunday evening, just after sunset, the war room Danielle and I had quietly built cracked open this time. Not from strategy, but something far more personal. She stood by the kitchen island, unmoving. Slowly, Shurisi, she said, Evan one-to-one, a courage. There's something I've never told you. I turned away one. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. It's about Ethan. The name chilled the room. She sat across from me, folding her hands tightly. 2 years ago, at a Crescent function, you had left early. He waited until I was alone. Said things that weren't professional, that weren't respectful. I didn't interrupt. I could feel a tightness behind my ribs. Something ancient, something possessive. She continued. He said you were too gentle, that I was too sharp for someone like you, that if I ever got tired of playing perfect, he'd be around. My mouth went dry. Did he touch you? Noma nominum arnum. But he leaned in, close enough, the kind of closeness meant to leave a stain. I stood up, paced the room once. My thoughts weren't clear. My instincts were one away. Why didn't you tell me this before? She looked away, then back. This time with tears she refused to let fall. Because I didn't want to see what it would do to you. Not back then. What should? You were still building, still believing in that place. I thought I was protecting you. I stared at her. But you weren't just protecting me. You were protecting him too. No. Don't twist this. I hated what he did. But if I told you, you would have done something reckless. You would have gotten yourself fired or worse. The silence between us became an accusation neither of us voiced. I didn't know what hurt more, what Ethan did, or the fact that she didn't trust me to know. Danielle's voice cracked. I thought I was strong enough to bury it. But when I saw that picture of your name ripped off the door, I knew this wasn't just business. He's been trying to erase you for years, and I let him get that close. I dropped back into the chair, elbows on knees. You're supposed to be the one person who never lies to me. I didn't lie. I just stayed silent. And that silence, might have cost us more than I thought. My throat clenched. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. But she didn't squeeze back either. Then she whispered, if you still want to burn it all down, do it. But don't use fire. Use standards. Use the one thing he's never had. I looked at her again and saw something different. Not fear, not guilt, resolve. And that's when I knew this wasn't just my reckoning. It was ours. They threw me out of their house. So I built a better one. By Monday morning, I'd registered Precision Protocol Inc., a small, independent consulting firm focused on regulatory compliance, forensic system audits, and ethical data infrastructure. In name, it sounded like a boutique shop. In reality, it was the base camp of my reckoning. Danielle watched me file the paperwork at our dining table. She didn't say anything until I hit submit. You've always been best when you're rebuilding, she said softly. Not surviving, designing. It stuck with me. Not just the words, but the way she said them like she was remembering something I'd forgotten. The Evan who used to sketch out better systems, not just patch broken ones. By Wednesday, I had a name, a license, a website, and a burner phone that buzzed with a restricted number. Mr. Carter, This is Helena Brooks. I'm calling on behalf of the city's Department of Housing Infrastructure. We've received your notice about the Crescent system vulnerabilities. I replied, calm, measured. Would you be willing to assist our audit team on a temporary contract basis? It's urgent. Discrepancies in Crescent's building compliance logs have raised concerns with council. I paused just long enough to remind her that I wasn't desperate. Of course, I'd be happy to help ensure the public's trust is protected. Danielle raised an eyebrow as I ended the call. That's how it starts. No, I said, walking to the window. That's how it's legitimized. We didn't celebrate. We didn't even open wine. Instead, I pulled out the old network schematics Ethan had once mocked me for printing. I mapped out what he had changed, what he thought I'd forgotten, and what only I knew had never been documented. Ethan had built over my foundation, but never rewrote it. That would be his downfall. By Friday, I'd filed 3 preliminary reports, subtle but sharp. Enough to get the city watching, enough to make Ethan twitch. Then came the call. Gregory Lawson, voice tight, rushed, uncharacteristically nervous. I need to ask you something. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence lean hard. The infrastructure control system. Ethan's team tried a standard reset. Nothing's working. The entire platform is locked. I stayed still. He continued. He says it's encrypted with legacy keys. No one on our team can access it. I walked to the window. The sun was setting behind the skyline gold cutting through glass. Have you asked Ethan why he never changed the root framework? A pause. Evan, can you fix it? I glanced down at the Precision Protocol logo glowing on my laptop. No, it should be, I said, but I can document it. Then I hung up. Danielle didn't ask what the call was. She just walked over and slipped a folder into my hand city contracts. Already signed. Gregory thought this was a systems problem. He hadn't realized yet. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as I designed it. And now, it had a new architect. Cliffhanger, Gregory Goy, Huang Lon. Systems locked. Ethan can't fix it. He used to call me a liability. Now he was asking for my time. The message came early. 47 a timestamp that said desperation more than planning. The subject line just read, coffee, 3 p.m., Café Orso. Please come alone. Danielle noticed me freeze as I read it. Who wiki several? She asked, brushing her hair behind her ear. Ethan. She closed her laptop slowly. You don't owe him anything. I know. I said, that's why I'm going. Café Orso sat tucked into a quiet Yaletown alley, far from Crescent's mirrored headquarters. It was the kind of place where deals weren't made, but endings were often discussed. Ethan was already seated when I arrived. No latte, no laptop, just him, slouched, staring into a cup of cold water. He stood when I walked in habit or fear. I wasn't sure. You came, he said, like he wasn't convinced I would. I don't do sympathy visits, I said. Sitting down, he slid a USB drive across the table. No label, Wibakanam, just a scratch across one side. That's not a trap. It's the only leverage I have left. I didn't touch it. Why? I asked. He looked away. Because the house is burning. And I helped light the match. For the first time, I saw Ethan not as my enemy, but as something worse, a man who had lost control of the monster he thought he could ride. He leaned forward. After you left, Gregory moved fast. He cut corners on 3 infrastructure projects, pushed false compliance reports through. I signed off on 2 of them. You? I said flatly. I thought I could contain the damage, that I'd fix things before anyone noticed. But when the inspection data stopped matching the invoices, the city flagged us. And now you come to me. He sighed. Because Gregory won't back down. He thinks we can outlast the audit. And if we go down, the entire company burns. Staff, pensions, contracts, all of it. I watched him for a long second. So this is your redemption arc. He shook his head. This is survival. But maybe part of me thought you'd know what to do with it. I picked up the drive. Finally, it felt too light for the weight he claimed it carried. I'm not here to fix your mistake. Ethan Deshiberpaninen. I'm here to make sure no one else suffers because of it. He nodded slowly. That's more than fair. Back at the apartment, Danielle sat at the dining table, reviewing city contractor files. He gave it to you. Shuanawini, she asked. I placed the drive beside her tea. I don't trust it yet, but it's real enough that he's scared. She looked at me, eyes heavy with concern. What are you going to do? I opened my laptop. Exactly what you told me. I won't burn them with fire. I'll bury them with facts. Danielle reached over and squeezed my hand. Then make sure you dig deep enough. The USB was old 3 months, give or take, not a recent backup or a hasty download. It was intentional. Archived, hidden, I plugged it into my personal machine. One I'd built years ago when I still believed data could save a company from itself. Now, I hoped it could dismantle one. Danielle stood behind me, arms crossed. We'd turned the apartment lights low. The only glow came from the monitor. File after file populating the screen. Start with the folders marked QCA3, she said. I opened the directory. It held over a dozen reports, inspection photos, timestamps, signed off compliance checklists. At first glance, they seemed normal. But that was the trick. What summer sickage? I murmured. Opening one labeled Bridgeway Retrofit, October. It took 10 seconds for the lie to appear. Photos of safety railings fully installed. But I recognized the site. Those guardrails didn't arrive until mid-November. The report was dated October 14th. Danielle leaned in. That's a forged timestamp. And so were the next three. And the next 7. Safety systems signed off weeks before they were installed. Critical inspections marked complete on days we had freezing rain warnings. This isn't negligence, I said quietly. This is deliberate. Danielle placed a hand on my shoulder. He knew. I knew who she meant. Gregory Lawson. He'd signed these documents, digitally and in ink. Every fake passed through him. Ethan may have dragged the match across the box, but his father poured the fuel. It hit me then months ago, when I'd presented an anomaly in cost projections. Gregory had dismissed it with a shake of his head. His hand had trembled slightly. I'd thought it was age. It was fear. The screen blinked with a new file loading. Internal memo, Crescent Leadership, confidential. I opened it. Ethan's name was on the forward line, but the content was Gregory's. Cost savings require discretion in reporting. External auditors rely on confidence more than confirmation. Our internal team will ensure visual documentation reflects compliance expectations. Translation, fake it until someone dies. Danielle exhaled sharply. He planned this, months in advance. What's your mountain? I nodded. The betrayal burned deeper now. This wasn't just about pushing me out. It was about removing anyone who might question the narrative. Crescent didn't just lose its ethics, it hunted them down and fired them. A voicemail icon flashed on my phone. I played it on speaker. Ethan's voice, low and tight. I didn't know how far he'd go. I didn't know until I found that memo. It paused. I don't want to become him. And I think you don't either. Danielle looked at me. He's right. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Because somewhere beneath the shock and anger, a darker thought stirred. If Gregory was willing to bury facts to protect power, what else had he buried? And how many people had looked the other way, just to stay employed? The USB was no longer a tool. It was a weapon. The question was, who would I aim it at first? Danielle stood at the kitchen counter, her hand resting on the rim of a wine glass she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The lights were dimmed, casting soft shadows across the dining table. Our plates sat untouched. Salmon, his superiorno, roasted carrots, everything she'd prepared had gone cold. I didn't notice. Not really. My eyes had been glued to the screen for hours, spreadsheets, timestamps, regulatory loopholes, and legal briefs. I had built a timeline so precise it made a prosecutor's case look amateur. My mind ran on caffeine and algorithms, on whispers of revenge dressed as accountability. She had tried to talk. The first few nights, she'd sat beside me, offering insight, but slowly. I stopped looking up, stopped asking. She became the background noise to my silent war. Now, standing there in the dim light, she finally spoke. I don't know who you're becoming, she said quietly. And I don't think you do either. The words didn't land like an accusation. They landed like a bruise deep, already aching. I looked up. She wasn't angry. She looked removed, like someone watching a familiar house from the outside, unsure if they still had the key. You barely eat. You barely sleep, she continued. You talk to me in bullet points now. F1, like I'm one of your presentations. I closed the screen slowly. I'm trying to do the right thing. I said number one, two, barely above a whisper. I know for you want orders. She nodded, voice steady. But somewhere in the middle of all this, you stopped asking what the right thing looks like for us. She pulled out a folded envelope from her cardigan. My heart caught. It's not signed, she said, but I drafted it 4 days ago. A separation agreement, clean assurance someone, legal, just in case. Danielle sat across from me. Her voice shook just slightly. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was scared. Scared that you were slipping into this war and leaving everything else behind. That the Evan I married, the one who built things to protect people, was being replaced by someone who wanted to destroy. I looked down at the charts again, schematics, contracts, nonations, the USB, every file meticulously tracked, every anomaly circled. And yet, never at one, I had somehow overlooked her. Why didn't you go through with it? I finally asked. She offered a sad smile. Because when you played Ethan's voicemail, I saw it. The hesitation in your eyes. That moment when revenge didn't feel so clean anymore. That's when I knew you were still in there. You're the only reason I'm not him, I said quietly. Danielle reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then don't just take him down. Make sure something better rises in its place. The notification chimed on my phone. A new text. From Ethan. Give me a chance to stand in front of them. Just once. I stared at it. Danielle watched me read, then said, let him speak. Just make sure the spotlight's bright enough to show the truth. I didn't answer yet, but I knew I would, because this story was no longer about punishment. It was about what we chose to rebuild when the fire settled. The last time Ethan Lawson stood in front of a crowd, he fired me. That moment had been sharp, calculated, and dripping with entitlement. Today, he stood alone, no podium, no boardroom table to hide behind. Just a trembling mic and 100 folding chairs filled with community members. I sat near the back of the West Point Community Center, Danielle beside me. No one knew who I was, not officially. But the room carried tension, like it could smell history. Ethan looked smaller than I remembered. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a gray sweater and jeans. His shoulders hunched slightly, hands clasped. He scanned the room like a man searching for courage. My name is Ethan Lawson, he began, voice tight. I used to believe leadership meant control, that it meant pushing through no matter the cost, that it meant winning, even when no one else understood what was being lost. He paused, then looked directly into the rows of faces. 3 months ago, I signed off on a project that violated environmental regulations. I falsified timelines, ignored testing standards, and pushed a team past its ethical limits. And I did that, not because I was pressured, because I thought I could get away with it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I also removed a man from this company, he continued, voice thickening, not because he was incompetent, but because he knew too much, because I thought removing him would remove the problem. But it only removed my compass. He looked down for a second, then back up. That man is sitting somewhere here tonight, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I came here to tell you the truth so that maybe, just maybe, this town can rebuild with eyes open. Silence. No applause, no outrage, just silence. He stepped away from the mic and looked around. Not for approval, but for air. Like breathing had become effort. Danielle leaned toward me. You didn't think he'd go through with it. I wasn't sure, I replied. But now I am. He spotted me on his way down the steps. His eyes widened just slightly enough to know he'd seen me. Enough to know he'd been watched. He walked over slowly, stopping just short of our row. Did I pass? He asked. Voice low. I studied his face. Gone was the smug air of Crescent. In its place, a man who had just stripped himself bare. I stood. Come walk with me. He blinked. Not an answer, but not a rejection either. He followed. I never set out to become a reformer. Revenge had been personal, a slow, calculated return for what was taken from me. But what started as a targeted reckoning began to swell, pushing into something bigger than Crescent. Bigger than Ethan, bigger than me. It began with a call from the Vancouver Department of Provincial Infrastructure. They were quietly assembling a new oversight initiative, a regulatory alliance to prevent future ethical failures in the construction and architectural industry. I was at the top of their list. Someone had vouched for me. I suspected it was Ethan. The meeting took place at Vancouver City Hall, not in the ornate council chambers, but in a stark, soundproofed conference room with glass walls and an oval table of polished pine. Around it sat a cross-section of British Columbia's public and private power structure. Deputy ministers, heads of compliance, Girasso Shibram, two whistleblowers who had taken down billion-dollar contractors, and me, the man who was once fired on his wedding day. Danielle came with me, but waited in the lounge. Before I stepped in, she said, "If you accept, make sure it's for the future, not the past." The air inside the room was taut with anticipation. Papers shuffled, devices muted. The deputy minister began, hands clasped. "Mr. Carter, we're proposing the creation of a permanent provincial alliance, a cross-sector ethics committee with authority to audit, certify, and reform how major projects operate. We'd like you to lead it." "Why me?" I asked. Genuinely unsure, he didn't blink. "Because you exposed a system without burning down the house. You showed us how to rebuild it." That hit me hard. For most of my life, I had been the man behind the scenes signing compliance statements, redlining blueprints, staying invisible, and now they wanted me to write the rules. The meeting lasted just under 2 hours. I didn't give them an answer right away. But as I left, every footstep echoed with clarity. Outside, the sky over Vancouver was a bruised gray. Danielle stood by the stone railing, arms folded. "Well, they gave me the keys," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Just don't become the thing you were fighting." I nodded. I wouldn't. Back at home, I sat at my desk, cluttered with Crescent blueprints, new draft policies, and sketches for what would become the Provincial Alliance for Infrastructure Ethics. The logo was rough. The mission wasn't. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Neuron Camino 1. I almost let it ring out. Then came the message. "Gregory Lawson, I want to meet." Not for work, for the truth. Is shown. For a full minute, I did nothing. Gregory, the man who mentored me, then stayed silent when his son destroyed me, was finally reaching out. But why now? What did he want from me that wasn't already lost? I texted back 2 words. "Name the place." The next morning, I drove to a quiet coastal park in Kitsilano. The weather was damp, the Pacific breeze salt-tanged and restless. Gregory stood near the benches overlooking the inlet, in a dark coat. Older than I remembered, but still proud. Still standing too straight for a man who'd watched everything crumble. We didn't shake hands. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low. "You asked for the truth." I replied. "You've had time." He stared at the water. I knew what Ethan was doing. Not the details, but enough. And I said nothing. Because if I had stopped him, I'd have exposed what I signed years before deals. Shortcuts. Favors that weren't illegal, but they weren't clean either. He turned to face me. I told myself I was protecting the company, but really I was protecting myself. His voice caught on that last word. "You watched me get fired. You saw my name dragged, and you said nothing. Because if I had defended you, people would have asked why. They would have found the cracks. And the board. The board would have devoured us both." I felt anger crawl back up my throat, but it didn't rise. "And now," he exhaled. "Now when I have nothing left to lose. My name means less than your silence. And I'm tired of pretending that was ever worth it." We stood there in the wind. 2 men once aligned, now divided by the very legacy one had built and the other had survived. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked. Gregory shook his head. "Not forgiveness. Just understanding, and maybe, someday, your words not for me, but for Ethan." I didn't answer. Not right away. But as I turned to leave, I said, "I'll let you know if I ever believe you deserve them." Behind me, I heard nothing. Just the waves. Just the wind. 1 year to the day. That's how long it had been since Ethan Lawson sent me that photo of my nameplate, stripped from my office door, with a message that read, "Congratulations, here's your wedding gift." And today, walking hand in hand with Danielle past the new West Point Civic Complex, I got another message. It simply said, "Thank you for not destroying me." The sun was setting behind the glass and steel facade we had helped reimagine. The building stood not just as a functional space, but as a declaration of integrity, of reform, of what happens when you don't surrender to rage but let principle guide the path forward. The complex had been Crescent's final project before their license was revoked and the company absorbed into a public-private coalition. And now, It had become the flagship symbol of everything the new alliance stood for. Danielle glanced at me as my phone buzzed. Another inspection report. I shook my head, staring at the screen. Ethan, she asked quietly. I nodded. It had been a strange year for him. After stepping down and exposing the failures of Crescent's leadership, his own included, he disappeared from public view. Took a teaching job in Saskatchewan. Taught architectural ethics. From what I heard, he'd grown quiet, not ashamed, but aware. Gregory Lawson, his father, never recovered his influence. The board severed ties. A quiet settlement followed, but it wasn't about crushing Crescent. It was about setting a bar no one could quietly crawl under again. Danielle squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked up at the glass panels, catching the last gold of the day. Yeah, Kim, better than okay. We walked on in silence, the way couples do when words would only dilute the feeling. The weight of justice done not with fire, but with patience. Not with wrath, but with resolve. Memory with As we reached the plaza entrance, I paused. There it was. The plaque, Yeshikarinonum Wakan, West Point Civic Complex, inaugurated by the Provincial Ethics Alliance for Architecture and Infrastructure. Chair, Keith Shorn. Evan Carter. Danielle smiled. You built this not just the steel and stone. The way people look at responsibility now. I pulled out my phone again. Reread Ethan's message. Then I typed back. Some gifts can't be returned. Make sure you earn it. I watched the message deliver. No reply came. None was needed. Closure didn't have to be loud. Sometimes we're no worse assurance. It arrived as a quiet footstep beside you. Sometimes, as a building standing firm where one once crumbled. I slipped my phone into my pocket, kissed my wife's temple, and walked forward. Not as the man who had been wronged, but as the one who rebuilt what mattered. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to remember who you really are. When I was pushed out of that office, stripped of my title, my dignity, and the years I gave without complaint, it felt like the world folded in. That feeling of betrayal, of being discarded like I never mattered, is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But what followed was something even more powerful. The quiet rebuild, brick by brick. Not of revenge, but of purpose. This was my office story, but I know it's not the only one. Maybe you've lived it too in a boardroom where no one stood up for you. In a company that forgot your name after the results were in. You're not alone. There are countless office stories like this, echoing in the hearts of people too proud to speak, too hurt to fight back. And in that silence, God sees you. He never forgets your effort. He watches in the moments when you bite your tongue, when you walk away instead of exploding. He was there when I was handed that cruel email on my wedding day. He was there when I chose not to ruin someone, but to outgrow them. So here's what I've learned. Patience isn't weakness. Strategy isn't cowardice. When you move with clarity and faith, your time will come. Not always fast, but always just thank you for spending time with me. If this story made you feel something, share it. Leave a 1 in the comments if you want to hear more true office stories, or tell us your own. You never know who might need to hear it. We rise by rebuilding, not by burning. And sometimes, redemption shows up in a text message you never expected. Until next time, stay strong. And remember, God keeps the receipts